Welcome to the Soulful Insights Podcast. I'm your host, Tandy. Today's episode is going to be a powerful one for those of you who have experienced childhood trauma, relationship trauma, or religious trauma. If you're trying to overcome the lingering emotional scars and other effects from all that you've experienced, this episode is for you. So to begin, I would like to set the stage for this episode by defining trauma, self-abandonment, and the effects that it can have on identity and relationships. All forms of trauma and self-abandonment deeply impact your core identity, your relationship to the divine, and your ability to have healthy relationships in your life. It also shapes how you perceive yourself and how you interact with the world around you. So we're going to start with childhood trauma. And before we begin diving into all of this, I do want to say that this episode is probably going to be pretty long. I'm not going to break it up. So, if you have to watch or listen to this in parts, that's totally fine. Just, we'll be here when you come back to finish, but it is going to be long. So I'm just going to warn you. But it's really important. There's a lot of information here. So, definitely grab a cup of coffee and a snack and we will dive in. So, like I said, we're going to start with childhood trauma. This could be from physical or emotional neglect, any form of abuse, growing up in a chaotic and or emotionally unavailable household. Any or all of these scenarios can create wounds that can and will follow you into adulthood. And I know there are people that I know in my life who they were never yelled at or screamed at or physically harmed or physically neglected or anything like that, and were not really aware of how impactful it was in their life to be just ignored as a punishment for days on end, or to have to tiptoe around one of your parents being told, don't upset them, just stay quiet, don't bother them. Even those messages can be very damaging. These early experiences may create default programming and beliefs that you are not worthy of love, to silence your needs, to hold in your emotions in order to survive in either a chaotic or emotionally unavailable environment. Toxic or abusive childhood experiences can result in patterns of people-pleasing, self-abandonment, self-doubt, disconnection from your authentic self. And I know a lot of people don't really understand what that means. A lot of people are not even aware that they are disconnected from authenticity. Inauthentic patterns can even result from small defining moments in your childhood that you may not readily recognize as trauma, but they may have impacted what you believed about who you are and various aspects of your authentic self, what you believed about that. For example, I'll just give you my example. I was a very talkative child. Surprise, here we are, right? Whatever you think that means, I was 10 times more than that, okay? My teachers would try everything to get me to stop talking in class. So the teacher would start out by sitting me between two boys, thinking that, a 7 or 8-year-old girl probably doesn't want to talk to boys. That did not work. I chattered on endlessly to the boys. So my desk would be moved into the corner of the room, 10 feet away from anyone else. I still talked to whoever was sitting within earshot of me. My desk, not in every, obviously, classroom throughout elementary, this did not happen, but this did happen in some, where my desk was eventually moved into the hallway, where I was completely isolated and alone so that I could not talk to anyone. So you can imagine the messaging that's being sent here. Yeah, I was talkative, but this is another, to me, in my adult self, this is a problem with institutionalized education, not with me. Because my talkative nature was a part of my gift that I came into this world with. It was a part of my authentic self. It's just a part of me. It's not bad, it's not wrong, and it should not have been punished. Yeah, I was disruptive of a classroom, but institutionalized education does not account for all of the gifts and talents and abilities that every child has And some of us don't sit still very well, and we get punished. And a lot of that stuff, our authentic self, is kind of forced into this suppression, which is not healthy. My grandmother often told me I was rude, that I interrupted people, and that I talked too much. In fact, both of my grandmothers would make these comments, not just one of them. There was a girl who lived in my grandmother's neighborhood. And when me and my cousin, who's about 6 months older than me, would stay overnight at my grandma's house, this girl would come over to my grandma's and she would want to play. And of course, me and my cousin are standing there together, and she would say, I want to play with her, but I don't want to play with you. And she would literally say, I won't play if you come. And so I told my cousin, I'm like, will you find out? And realize I'm like 8 or 9 years old. Okay, I'm pretty young. And I told her, I said, can you find out why she doesn't want to play with me? And so my cousin went off and played, and I just sat in my grandma's house and watched TV. And when my cousin came back from playing for dinner, she said that this girl would not play with me because I talked too much, and so she hated me for that reason. At school, I was called motor mouth. Okay, there's just some basic examples for you. As you can see, none of these things in isolation would really be considered trauma. In fact, even altogether, you wouldn't say any of this was trauma. But there was, collectively, they led to programming that something was wrong with this fundamental part of me. People hated me because of it. I was told I was rude. I was punished, right? That the message was that I needed to suppress this aspect of myself. This is where, we talk about shadow work, because this is an aspect of me that could have been suppressed to the shadow. Like, this is bad, this is wrong, you shouldn't be this way. What all of these people failed to recognize, and this was a failure on their part, not mine, is that being talkative is a gift of mine. I've been given the power of words. I've been a public speaker. Obviously, I'm here on this podcast speaking to you right now. What I once thought was a, quote, bad part of me was actually one of my greatest gifts. That was part of my soul's purpose on this earth. And if we lived in a truly loving, heart-centered society, this would have been fostered, developed, and honored instead of suppressed and punished. And I know there are probably aspects of you where this has happened. Discovering all the ways that others have caused you to suppress your authenticity is part of the healing journey. Learning to love and embrace all of who you are. I love my talkativeness. I don't care. If people don't like me because I'm talkative, I do interrupt people sometimes. I don't mean to. I try not to. But I definitely do that. But I'm not going to apologize for who I am. I will apologize for interrupting if I do that, because I realize that that's not socially acceptable. But I embrace this part of me. And I know it takes time and a lot of work, but it is work that is so worth it. So in all of this childhood trauma, abuse to just messages that you received about parts of you that were not worthy or were not good or that should be suppressed, that is all of the aspects of either childhood trauma or defining moments, as I call them, that you may have had that are affecting how you show up in the world today. Then we're going to move into relationship or betrayal trauma, such as toxic relationship dynamics or manipulation, which reinforces feelings of unworthiness, worthlessness, confusion, mistrust, leaving you vulnerable to self-abandonment in an effort to cling on to what feels like love to you, even if it's harmful. Toxic relationships often stem from childhood wounds. So that's why we're moving into this now, because we see childhood wounds that are now reflecting in the relationships. Friendships or romantic relationships that you have, it doesn't matter, often stem from childhood wounds and beliefs that you have about yourself and the world around you, and what you are willing to allow people to treat you like. These are all things that have not been healed, and therefore you allow individuals into your life who treat you according to what you believe you deserve, or you cling to relationships due to abandonment issues or fear. So you kind of see how we move along this trend of how remaining unhealed can cause you to remain in a lot of painful situations. But we're also going to be discussing high demand religious environments, which is another part of childhood, obviously, if you grew up in these environments. But in high demand religious environments, these dynamics, toxic dynamics, are actually amplified, whether it's what you were taught in childhood about who you are and what you're to become as an adult, or in high demand religious environments, toxic relationship dynamics are also amplified. Women are compared to Eve, labeled as inherently flawed, spiritually weak, and easily deceived by Satan. And therefore, women must submit to male leadership to remain righteous and to avoid deceiving other people, including their own children and their families. Religious dogma continues to infiltrate women's lives and even their home life with gender roles and the identities of wife and mother, which are the only identities that are appropriate for you. These are identities that God wants you to have. This dictates the entire trajectory of a woman's life in servitude of others at the expense of herself. And she is called selfish if she does not willingly accept that servitude. If she complains or wants to find value in herself in other ways, absolutely unacceptable. Religious conditioning continues with the portrayal of God as a father who demands perfection. God withholds blessings or favor if you do not pray enough, worship enough, read your Bible enough. Now, people will say, no, you're free in Christ, you're free in Christ. That's BS. Yes, on the surface, that's what they believe. They claim that you're free in Christ. But, and there's a big but, if anything goes wrong in your life, if you are going through struggles, if you have any mental health issues, anxiety, depression, PTSD, bipolar, I don't care what it is. If you have a mental health issue, if you go through a divorce, if you're going through grief after the death of a child, doesn't matter what it is. If you, it's as simple as you don't feel like you're receiving answers in your life to questions decisions you're trying to make. Now, if anything like this goes wrong in your life, all of a sudden you get gaslit. And they'll say, well, are you going to church every Sunday? Are you reading your Bible every day? Are you praying every day? Well, you must not be doing it enough. So here we go. Yes, we're free in Christ. It's amazing. But, something went wrong in your life? Never mind. You're not praying enough. You're not reading your Bible enough. You're not righteous enough. God isn't going to help you out. This mirrors the dynamics of toxic relationships, normalizing conditional love, reinforcing the belief that one's worth is tied to servitude of the abuser and external validation. Together, these experiences disconnect you from your divine essence, perpetuating cycles of pain and self-abandonment that demand healing and reclamation of personal sovereignty. And this is what I talk about all the time, because these religious beliefs are toxic. And yes, they will tell you rhetoric all the time about being free in Christ and, all this stuff. But as soon as something goes wrong in your life, they will drop you like a hot potato. They will gaslight you. So now that I've provided a brief overview, I want to let you know that I will be discussing a host of tools to help you through the healing process, regaining hope and reclaiming your personal power after trauma or abuse in any of these areas. So I want you to realize that we are going to get there, but this podcast is going to be quite lengthy because there's a lot to talk about. If you're wondering if I can possibly understand what it's like to go through trauma, I want to assure you that I have had my own journey through the depths of hell multiple times. And while my journey is unique to me, and I do not claim to understand what anyone else has gone through in their life or how they experienced it, you can take comfort that I am not speaking from a place of privilege where I lived some idyllic life and am far removed from any understanding of suffering. I have heard so many people in the spiritual space make toxic comments about painful, abusive situations and difficulties in life. And these people in the spiritual space will talk about, I'm so grateful for my struggles. I wouldn't change a thing about my life. And then they'll talk about losing a business or struggling with some depression during a faith transition. Very mild things. And then say these were the greatest things that happened to them. And then implying that we all should feel that way about our, quote, struggles or difficulties. Okay, let me just be clear here. We're not talking about losing a business, okay? We're not talking about you're confused about your religion and you feel a little bit sad. I'm talking about depths of hell, gut-wrenching, suffering, abuse, all of this kind of stuff. They do not understand. They don't. And they really need to stop talking about this stuff because it just exposes how far removed they are from unconditional love, empathy, and compassion because they haven't experienced extreme trauma and therefore it doesn't exist. And it's all in your head and you can just be happy anyway, right? I want to say up front before I get into my story, I 100% would change all of it if I could. There is nothing positive that came out of what I went through. But I survived. And I am now thriving, not because of it, but in spite of it. I am not one of those people that's going to tell you, oh, I'm so grateful for all the abuse I went through. Hell no, I'm not. And you will never hear me say that I am. So if you feel the same as me, this podcast is for you. Because I will never tell you that this stuff is okay. I will never tell you just to think positive thoughts. I will never tell you that. I call my story Rising from the Ashes. So before we get into my story, I want to give a trigger warning right here. I will be mentioning physical and sexual abuse and suicidal ideation in this story. So please take care of yourself and do not listen to this if it is a trigger for you because I will be talking about those things. I'm not going to get too graphically into it, but I'm going to give enough detail so you understand the extremity of it. So please click off now if this may be a trigger for you. Take care of yourself, please. Okay, on with my story. I grew up in a very physically and emotionally abusive home. And I have memories of this from about the age of 4 or 5. Not all of my abuse was at the hands of my parents, but one of my earliest memories was an extremely traumatic experience of sexual abuse that was prolonged and included sexual humiliation. Now realize, I'm 5 years old. I'm not going to go into the details, but it was extreme and caused severe trauma that deeply affected me for decades. 40 years later, I'm still unraveling messed up beliefs about myself and other people as a result of this trauma that I experienced at 5 years old. So, that was one of my first memories. This was not at the hand of a family member or anyone like that. But I do have family members who are aware of it now, parents that are aware of it who have dismissed it. So I will give you a brief overview of some of the physical abuse that I endured. I won't go into graphic detail, but I want you to understand what I went through and the dark hell that I had to crawl out of. So I remember one night, I was about 8 years old. I have twin brothers, okay? They were not quite 2 at this point, and their bedroom was right next to mine. I was laying in bed, I was unable to fall asleep, and I heard one of the boys start crying, and then shortly thereafter, the other started crying. And my parents were in the basement watching TV. So there's no way that I thought they would be able to hear them. So I got out of bed and I went into their bedroom to see what was wrong. I feel like that's just a natural response. I'm 8 years old. They're like, 20 months old, something like that. Within about 30 seconds of me coming into their room to see what was wrong, my dad was in the doorway. He didn't check on the twins. He was not concerned about them crying. He immediately asked me what I was doing in their room. And I told him I was checking on them to see why they were crying. He did not believe me. He pulled me out of the room, pulled his belt out, and told me, if you lie to me, I will whip you twice as hard. And then he asked me again, did you wake up the twins? And I stood there for what seemed like an eternity, trying to decide what to do. If I told the truth, I would get whipped twice as hard. But if I lied, I could spare myself pain. Now realize I grew up in a high demand religion. I was 8 years old. I had just been baptized. Lying was a sin. So I was put, and I would have disfavor with God for doing this. I would have to repent. This was a big deal. I had just been baptized. I was, this was a big deal to me as an 8-year-old. I had to decide whether I would lie and have disfavor with God, but not get spanked as hard or as much, or tell the truth and God would be okay with me, but I would have way more physical pain. And I sat there for a minute trying to decide, and my little 8-year-old self decided to lie and spare myself more physical pain. So I told my dad that I did wake them up, even though I didn't, and I was whipped still multiple times with a belt and sent back to bed. I had bruises that made it difficult to sit down on the hard chair at my desk in school for several days. Now, there was absolutely no reason for this type of violence over something so trivial and stupid, but this is what I lived with. Most of the times when I was whipped like this in some way, spanked, I was spanked with spoons, rod, you name it. People say, oh, kids deserve to be spanked. I'm a good person because my kids spank my butt. The hell you are normal. You're not. You just think you are. Most of the time, this type of abuse, hitting children, is done because of the anger of the parent, not because of a, quote, deserving child. There's nothing that I had done wrong. So I'm going to give you another example. I was still 8 years old. My mom was shopping with her sister, and my dad was the one that was supposed to watch me and my 2-year-old twin brothers. They're about 2 years old now, and I was still 8. And he was the one that was supposed to watch us. An 8-year-old has no business babysitting twin 2-year-olds. And let me tell you, my brothers were as wild as they get. I came home to bunk beds taken apart, all kinds of crazy things that my brothers were doing. My grandma was often coming and picking them up because my mom was at the end of her rope with them, and I'm an 8-year-old. I'm clearly not going to be able to handle these boys. But my dad was working in the garage, and he was not watching us at all. So I go outside to play, and my twin brothers follow me. They were only wearing diapers because no one had put clothes on them. And at 8 years old, it didn't really occur to me that that was an issue, or that I was the one that was supposed to do it. It just did not register. And so we're outside playing, and my dad catches us outside and drags us all home, sent me to my room, went outside, found a metal rod outside, came back in, and spanked me repeatedly with this rod for taking my brothers outside in their diapers. Again, I'm 8 years old. I mean, my dad was the one that should have been responsible for watching them, making sure that they were dressed. This was not my responsibility, okay? So, I was locked in my room at times, sometimes for 3 hours at a time. There was a latch that was outside of my door, and they would just latch it locked. I could not have access to the bathroom or anything. I remember one time my 3-year-old twin brothers were locked in their room for a very long time. I don't remember the exact time frame. I knew it was 3 hours when I was locked in there because I was 10 and I had a clock in my room. But they were locked in their room for quite a while, and they were just barely potty trained, and my brother peed in the garbage can because he had no access to a bathroom, obviously, and my dad spanked him for that. So, again, my dad was always upset with my grades because I never had straight A's. Well, I always got a C in handwriting. I was ambidextrous. I could write with both. Actually, people are like, no, ambidextrous is rare. No, when I started coloring, my first inclination was to have 2 crayons, one in each hand, and I would color with both hands at the same time. I would alternate. I'd write one word with my left hand, one word with my right hand. That's how I naturally wrote from the very first time I picked up a pen or a pencil. But I didn't write very well with either one of them. So I always had a C in handwriting, always getting punished. My dad had this belief that if you ever told anyone they did a good job, they would stop trying to be good. So he believed he needed to point out everything wrong that you were doing. And so he was critical all the time. I was a child prodigy at the piano. I started writing music at 10 years old. But so he would have to find something wrong that I did, so he would tell me I played it too loud. He would find anything that he could find wrong with you. Even an A- was a failure because it wasn't an A. You did something wrong. Unfortunately, all the relatives in my life would either ignore me because I was just a child, or they would also find fault with things that I did, or they were very harsh with me. And I'm not going to go into all of that for the sake of time, but by age 10, I believed I was unlovable because there was not a single soul in my family, grandmothers, aunts, uncles, anyone who was not hard on me. I became suicidal, and I remember standing in front of the medicine cabinet at 10 years old. I don't know where my parents were, and I was trying to figure out what medicine would kill me if I took enough of it. I'm in 5th grade, mind you, and I remember worrying that if I took something that didn't kill me, but maybe made me blind or deaf or something like that, that would be horrible because that would just make my life worse. So clearly at 10 years old, I didn't know anything about medicine or side effects of taking too much of it. I didn't know. And so I didn't dare do it. But that was literally the only thing that saved my life that day, was that I didn't dare do it. Now, if I had known for 100% certainty that if I took X amount of something and I wouldn't survive it, and it was 100% guarantee, I would not have survived that day. I remember contemplating through my preteen years, like 10, 11, 12, the best way to commit suicide would be. I would contemplate everything you could possibly think of, but they all sounded kind of scary, and so I just never dared. Because I just didn't dare do it, but it was something I thought about. It was on my mind most of the time through much of my life. That was something that I considered. I went through a sexual assault at the age of 12 at my first girl-boy party. I was in 6th grade at the time. The boys were looking at, let's just say, inappropriate material that one of the boys' dads had, and the next thing I know, I'm getting lured into a bedroom, and I was assaulted there. Luckily, I screamed. One of my friends heard me. She was a very strong, athletic girl, and she was able to get the boys who were holding the door closed away from it, and we were able to run home. I was also sexually assaulted at the age of 13. I was held down. This one was worse. Let's just put it that way. When my mom picked me up to drive me home, I was screaming, rocking back and forth, and hyperventilating. Kind of a sign that something's wrong, wouldn't you not think? A normal human being would be alerted that something is very, very wrong here. She never asked me what was wrong. I had alluded to the fact that something had happened, and my mom just responded that I probably misunderstood what happened. She didn't know specifically what happened, but I knew not to trust my mom because my mom could not handle. She always tries to bypass reality. She wants to live with rose-colored glasses. When I got home, I was shaking and inconsolable, and my dad just threatened me that I better knock it off and stop being so dramatic. There were other things that happened, other threats. I was also taken back to that place again, even after that whole situation, because my parents did not believe me. So, in the middle of my teen years, I began to self-harm. I had been grounded for 3 months for missing an assignment. You heard that right. And I was contemplating different ways of ending my life, but I couldn't come up with something that didn't sound scary, and it turned into self-harm. When I met my husband, here's another fun part. His mother told my mom that no one would ever be good enough for her son, and that I was certainly not good enough for him. She tried to break us up incessantly, which she did succeed for about a month at one point, because he was definitely a mama's boy, and his mom was so adamant about it. But when we got, we got back together, whatever. When we got engaged and we had scheduled the wedding venue, she stomped up the stairs and slammed the door. She refused to wear my wedding colors. And guess what? She and my husband's sister wore white dresses to the wedding. Yeah, you heard that right. You know what that means. If you don't, look it up. It's kind of like the middle finger to the bride. So that was fun. And they hated me for the good part of a decade after we got married. I don't think I've ever been fully liked by the family. I was shunned and hated by my in-laws. Even my husband's aunts, grandmas judged me. They were really harsh. So, for example, they threw a huge birthday dinner for my husband's older brother's wife in November. We got married in March, and then my birthday was the next month. So about 6 months later is my birthday. We're newly married. His mom dropped off a gift to my husband while I was at work. So they have this huge birthday dinner with candles and singing and gifts for my sister-in-law. And then when my birthday rolls around, nothing. So the struggles that I went through of just feeling absolutely and utterly unlovable seemed to never end. So do I understand what abuse and toxic relationships are like? Yeah, I absolutely do. For much of my life, I was afraid of God. The way that religion explains the nature of God sounded a lot like my dad. So I just tried to put my head down and do what was right and hope that God wouldn't be too mad at me if I wasn't perfect. It wasn't until a traumatic event when I was 25 years old that led to a short stay in a psychiatric ward in the hospital when I realized that I needed healing. I wasn't really living. I was just surviving. But I didn't know. At those young ages, I didn't know. No one offered me counseling or therapy, or that was not a thing. I tried several therapists. One of them wouldn't meet with me without having a door open where everyone could hear our conversations after I mentioned sexual abuse and sexual assault. I never met with him again. Another therapist just gave me a bunch of religious sermons to read and told me God loved me, but was very dismissive of what I was really going through. So I gave up on therapy. I tried antidepressants, which just numbed me out and made self-harm easier for me to do. It was not good. It was not helpful at all. So I had to wean myself off of them, which led to a lot of symptoms, including painful electric shock sensations in my face and hands, which made me even more resolute that I just did not like putting that in my body. But eventually, and I'm not saying any of these things are wrong for anyone, they just didn't work for me. So if they worked for you, wonderful. They did not work for me. Eventually, it led me to alternative modalities that finally started providing me relief. I had traumatic ruminating thoughts, debilitating anxiety, self-hatred, you name it. So, enough of my story. I only share this brief part of my story. It probably didn't feel brief, but if I were to tell you all the things, it would take years. Just to help you realize on some level, I do understand. My story is absolutely different than yours. But I do understand what it's like to feel like you're in the depths of hell. I know what it's like to feel unlovable. I know what it's like to have severe debilitating anxiety and self-hatred and ruminating thoughts and PTSD and like traumatic memories that come up that cause you to go into a panic and a sweat. I know those things. I have my own reasons for feeling that way. You have your own reasons for experiencing that, but I do understand. So I want to look at the layers of trauma, relationship trauma, religious trauma, childhood trauma, all of these things, and look at just all the layers and how it affects how you show up in your life. So we're going to start this time with relationship trauma. Toxic relationship dynamics like codependency, manipulation, gaslighting often stem, like I talked about earlier, from unresolved trauma that perpetuates cycles of pain and self-abandonment in relationships. Unresolved trauma will continue to be reflected in your relationships, both with friends and romantic, until it is healed and transcended. Every single time. I can promise you that. Codependency occurs when one partner sacrifices their own needs and identity to please or, quote, fix the other. This is really, really common in deeply religious people as well. The wife is usually the one who sacrifices because she is told this is God's will for her life. And it is often mistaken as love or righteous or whatever. This dynamic can develop in response to childhood trauma as well, where you're trying to fix or you're trying to be good enough for this person. And so you sacrifice, self-abandon and sacrifice for this person, right? It can also be a result of religious conditioning of women, where meeting other people's needs is required of you. It is God's will for you. You're supposed to be in servitude. And from childhood trauma perspective, your needs, meeting other people's needs was necessary for your survival because they were otherwise neglectful. And you need that tribe, you need those people for your survival, for food, for shelter. And so that self-abandonment can be necessary for, perceived by the brain as necessary for survival. Approval, you may be doing this to gain approval because your brain has been trained to seek outside approval, or it may be demanded by your religious doctrines. The demand for abandonment of self from religion is aimed mostly towards women. Religious conditioning is one prime reason many women end up in codependent relationships, because they mistake it for what God demands of them. And this creates a pattern of relying on external validation to feel worthy, and leaves anyone in these situations vulnerable to manipulation or financial abuse. Women often go through financial abuse where they are told you're not supposed to go to college or have a job or anything like that. You're a wife, you're a mother. Well, that leaves her vulnerable to abuse because she no longer has the ability to leave a relationship when she has children that need to be provided for, and she doesn't have the ability to do it. Then we run into manipulation. It's another toxic dynamic, often marked by controlling behavior that exploits emotional vulnerabilities. Manipulators use guilt, fear, or obligation to maintain power. But this can also mirror dynamics that you experienced in a childhood home or in a religious environment, where they will still use guilt and a sense of obligation. You are a woman, you are supposed to stay home, you are supposed to take care of your husband, you're supposed to take care of your children. You're not supposed to worry about yourself. You're just supposed to be happy serving other people. If you don't like it, you're a bad person, you're in disfavor with God, you're not righteous, that type of a thing. It's the same thing. That is an abusive relationship. It mirrors this. So people can get really confused. And this is another reason why they allow these types of relationships in their life, because it mirrors what they are taught in religious doctrines. This can also be something that you experienced in your childhood home, parents that use guilt and fear and all of that as well. So it feels familiar in a relationship. It isn't healthy. It's abusive. And we have gaslighting, which is a form of emotional abuse where one person distorts the other person's perception of reality, causing them to doubt their feelings, their experiences, and their intuition. And for those with trauma histories or who come from high demand religious conditioning, gaslighting can feel eerily familiar, as they may have been taught to dismiss their own reality or their own intuition or their own feelings or experiences to conform to others' expectations or narratives, or the expectations or narrative of the religion. Together, these dynamics create unhealthy attachment patterns where trauma survivors may seek relationships that replicate early experiences of conditional love, neglect, self-abandonment, or control because it feels familiar or normal. Someone who grew up feeling unworthy of love might unconsciously bond with partners who reinforce those feelings, perpetuating cycles of pain and feelings of being unworthy. But recognizing these patterns is the first step towards breaking free, healing, and then forming healthy, balanced relationships based on mutual respect and authenticity. Now, I have seen so many people get divorced from a toxic relationship and then run into another one. And I've even seen some women run into worse abuse the second time. You cannot walk away from one relationship and think that you're going to enter another one that's better without healing yourself first. You need time to really unravel why you were allowing this to happen and really regain your confidence and your sense of self before you go running into another relationship. I'm not saying it always will be worse or it always would be the same, but it's just not a good idea. Then we're going to go into religious trauma. Religious trauma is a very real thing that has been ignored because it is so pervasive in most religious doctrines and teachings, that abusive messages and teachings are just considered normal. People don't really question them because, of course, in religion, you're not allowed to question anything, right? Fear-based religious teachings and patriarchal structures often instill shame and self-abandonment by promoting a narrative of unworthiness and submission. This narrative, combined with patriarchal doctrines that prioritize male leadership, positions women as dependent on men for spiritual guidance and approval. Depending on, the religion and how high demand it is, this could be a little softer, a little harsher, but it's generally there. Teachings like God requires submission, the husband is the head of the household, often compel women to suppress their desires, needs, and individuality to serve their families and meet religious expectations, leaving no space for personal identity or sovereignty. These systems foster a deep fear of failure or divine punishment, with doctrines emphasizing that blessings, love, or even salvation are conditional on one's ability to meet certain standards required by God. This conditional approval mirrors the dynamics of toxic relationships, where love is withheld unless you conform to what I want you to do. Right? You can see how that mirrors a toxic dynamic. Women raised in these environments often internalize shame, feeling unworthy. And really, the reason women internalize a lot of these, they literally believe in their own subjugation because they believe that it is required by the divine. It's a part of their righteousness. You are not worthy of divine love and divine favor if you do not subjugate yourself to male authority. You also struggle with receiving love from men who are in your religious circles because they expect you to submit yourself to them, and if you don't, they see you as unworthy. They see you as rebellious, right? You abandon your authentic self to fit prescribed roles of servitude and compliance. Breaking free from these limiting beliefs begins with recognizing their roots in religious-based fear and control. These are not truths. They are man-made constructs. For example, a woman might challenge the belief that her worth is tied to her obedience by exploring spiritual paths that affirm her divine essence and autonomy. Embracing practices like meditation or breathwork can help reconnect her to her intuition and innate value. Another example is reframing the idea that as God as a punitive father into a feminine deity that is compassionate and nurturing, that celebrates individuality. By rewriting these narratives, women can release shame, reclaim their power, and step into lives defined by authenticity, self-love, and spiritual sovereignty. Childhood trauma, as we're going to flow into that, whether, like I spoke before, neglect, emotional, physical, inconsistent caregiving, there's a lot of ways this can happen, creates deep emotional wounds that often extend far into adulthood. In fact, childhood trauma is kind of part of your default programming. And so it affects how you show up in your life, whether you're aware of it or not. Even if it was just some defining moments, as I call them, rather than trauma per se, it still affects how you show up in adulthood. And a lot of these behaviors of maybe struggling to complete things, like finish a task or finish something, a lot of relationship dynamics, friendship dynamics, a lot of things are part of that default programming that came from childhood. When children grow up in environments where their basic emotional needs for love, safety, and validation are unmet, they internalize a sense of unworthiness. This can affect future relationships, and you may not even realize why you keep attracting these toxic, emotionally unavailable, whatever type of people. When in reality, it is just a part of your default programming of what you believe about yourself, what you believe about relationships, how you show up in the world, a lot of different things. This feelings of unworthiness or experiences from not having your needs met or not being validated as a child can manifest as self-doubt. Trauma can manifest as hypervigilance, a tendency to suppress emotions, to avoid conflict or rejection. There's a lot of things. We're not going to go into a ton of it because, like I said, this podcast is going to be long. So I just want to give some examples. Neglect can be particularly damaging as it communicates to a child that their feelings and needs are not important. The absence of nurturing often leads to difficulty trusting other people and forming healthy relationships. Similarly, abuse, whether physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, instills fear, shame, a distorted sense of self. A child who experiences abuse may learn to associate love with pain or control, setting the stage for accepting toxic dynamics later in life. And sometimes you don't even recognize how these patterns play out, or why or where it came from. The effects of unmet needs during childhood often surface in adulthood as maladaptive behaviors or patterns. Many survivors struggle with low self-esteem, people-pleasing behaviors, inability to set boundaries, making excuses for abusers, all of that, and many others. They may find themselves drawn to relationships that replicate the dynamics of their childhood. I have seen this in people that I know, and it breaks my heart because I see this person who is suffering so much with the effects of childhood abuse, and then they walk into a relationship. I'm like, oh, this woman was saying, he fits into my family so well. I'm like, yeah, that's the problem. She came from a physically abusive home. We don't want her to marry someone that fits into that, right? Sometimes it's that they're seeking to, quote, fix the unhealed wounds through partners or friends who are dismissive or abusive, emotionally unavailable. These patterns can perpetuate cycles of self-abandonment and then appear to confirm the negative beliefs that you've adopted about yourself because you keep running into familiar patterns and saying, hey, look, I am not lovable. I keep not being loved by the people in my life. When in reality, you don't realize that the way that you show up in life and what you accept attracts this into your life. That's why I say the relationships that you have reflect your unhealed wounds. But to you, it's perpetuating these beliefs that you're not good enough, you're unlovable, you don't deserve better. When in reality, there's nothing wrong with you. On a fundamental level, there's nothing wrong with you. You just simply continue to choose people who feel familiar. It's not bad or wrong. It's natural and it's normal to you to choose something that feels familiar. But in that, you find yourself in the same toxic dynamics over and over and over again. Additionally, childhood trauma disconnects individuals from their innate sense of self, and it can disconnect you from direct spiritual connection. So it feels normal to you to have a spiritual connection through a middleman, through the pastor, through a husband, through whatever other person, rather than spiritual sovereignty. When caregivers are the sources of harm or neglect, children often struggle to conceptualize a loving higher power. I experienced this myself. Both of my parents caused issues in various ways and made it really difficult for me to connect with God. In religious context, this disconnection is compounded by teachings of a conditional, punitive God, doctrines of eternal conscious torment if you don't have the, quote, correct religious beliefs, right? We've talked about how in a lot of religious teachings, anyone who's never even heard of your religion is just consigned to eternal hell for really no reason other than they just didn't have the opportunity to hear about it or whatever. This reinforces feelings of inadequacy and further alienating you from your divine essence. Healing these wounds involves acknowledging the pain and unmet needs. Acknowledge it. It was there. Don't make excuses for the people who neglected you or harmed you or whatever. Don't make excuses. This is about your healing and about you. Acknowledge it. Acknowledge that your needs were not met. Acknowledge the pain. Whatever it was they did, it doesn't matter. If it caused you pain, it did. It doesn't matter. If it caused you, and I don't mean that your pain doesn't matter, it doesn't matter what they did. It doesn't matter what someone else thinks about that. If they're like, oh, you shouldn't feel bad about that. No. Acknowledge it. If it caused you pain, it caused you pain. Reparenting the inner child is also another thing that is very effective. Learning to provide oneself with the love and validation that were absent in childhood. This is something you have to learn to do. Your love and validation needs to come within first. Self-love. You be your own biggest cheerleader. It's hard, I know, at first. But it's really important because then we're not looking to the outside world to validate us because they never will. People are selfish. People are mean. They have all sorts of opinions about things. Through practices like hypnotherapy, meditation, breath work, carefully selected therapists or life coaches, and I used life coaches because of my experiences with therapists. Nothing is right or wrong. It's what's best for you. But I do very, very much warn that you need to be careful. Not all of them are good, and some of them can actually cause more harm than good. And I've seen it in more people than just me. Self-compassion is also something that you need to give yourself. Give yourself grace. Survivors can begin to break free from these patterns, reclaim their worth, and create healthier, more fulfilling lives. So now we're going to get into the healing modalities for transformation. We kind of talked all about all of these patterns and what's causing difficulties in relationships and how you're showing up in your life and all of that. Now we're going to get into the healing modalities. So I'm going to start with these, like I say, these healing modalities can begin to provide you with a framework for healing and transformation. So let's begin with healing meditation journeys. This is one of my specialties I offer to my clients, and I do have a program being released this month that is called From Womb to Soul Purpose, which is a 12-week meditation journey designed to guide you through transcending trauma and reclaiming your life. So it starts from womb. And we work through inner child work. We work through shadow work and worthiness wounds and all kinds of things through this 12-week program. These meditation journeys can focus on a lot of different things, like I said, with the program that I have. Inner child healing, shadow work. They can even be used repeatedly for identifying and transcending defining events in your life that need healing. And so what these involve is a pre-session journaling to help bring your awareness to the specific time in your life or the specific issue that you are trying to work on, whether that's shadow work or, say early childhood, whatever that is. And that kind of brings your awareness to what issues might need healing. Now, your subconscious is going to give you the priority during the session. So we're not specifically saying, oh, I know I need to heal this time when I was 8 years old when this thing happened. It's going to come to your mind during the journey, but we're just trying to bring your awareness to a general area. And something else completely opposite may come up, and that's totally fine. And then you go into a 45-minute to an hour guided meditation journey. And these are really powerful. And then we have a little bit of integration and a post-session journaling that you do. And then you are supposed to integrate the lessons that you learned into your life. We have affirmations and all of that from each session. So that's kind of what meditation journeys are like. They are not an immediate. There are some things that are very quick, like hypnotherapy. This is something that you definitely need to continue working through. But it is quite effective. But it definitely is something that is just a part of the long haul of the journey, I would say. And then we go into breath work. Conscious breath work is a powerful healing modality that uses intentional breathing techniques to access and release stored trauma from the body and subconscious mind. Trauma often becomes trapped in the body, creating emotional, physical, and energetic blockages. Breathwork serves as a bridge between the conscious and subconscious, allowing individuals to process and release suppressed emotions safely and effectively. So you don't have to relive anything, you don't have to talk to anyone about it, which is one thing that I love about meditation journeys, breathwork, and a lot of this stuff is that you can release a lot without having to relive it, which is really, really good for trauma. When we experience trauma, our bodies often hold on to the stress response, tension, anxiety, hypervigilance, even after the event has passed. And conscious breath work bypasses the mind's defenses, activates the parasympathetic nervous system, signaling the body to relax and release these deeply held patterns. Through specific breathing rhythms, and depending on the method that you're using, stored emotions such as grief, anger, fear can surface, be processed, and create space for healing and clarity. And there's a lot of different modalities, and I'm just going to briefly go over them. Holotropic breath work uses intense rhythmic breathing combined with evocative music to reach altered states of consciousness. It can be really intense. I just want to warn you. I have done this. It's difficult. It is so absolutely life-changing, so don't let that scare you. But the breathing patterns can be a bit uncomfortable in the beginning. You have transformational breath work. This one is gentler than many of the others, like holotropic. And it is conscious breathing with positive affirmations and body mapping. It does help release trauma and cultivate self-love and inner peace. It's just a slower process. It's not as quick as holotropic breath work would be. You have clarity breath work, trauma-informed breath work, which is really good for people with complex trauma, PTSD. It is more of a slow, mindful breathing with a safe, supportive environment to prevent overwhelm, which is really good. Integrating breath work into trauma healing provides a safe and accessible way to reconnect the body and foster emotional resilience. With regular practice, people experience profound shifts in their well-being. I experienced major shifts, even just with 1 hour-long breathwork session. It can be really powerful, really, really, really powerful. I definitely recommend it, but I also feel like you need to feel drawn to the modalities that are right for you. The next one is hypnotherapy. This is a powerful therapeutic modality that accesses the subconscious mind to address the root causes of PTSD, trauma, phobias, anxiety, depression, ruminating thoughts, and other trauma-related conditions. It can also address addictions. Like a lot of people will use hypnotherapy for smoking, alcoholism. It addresses a lot of things. And also, unlike traditional talk therapy, you don't have to say anything. Hypnotherapy works by bypassing the conscious mind where defenses and resistance often reside and creates a state of deep relaxation and focused attention, allowing you to access repressed memories, reframe limiting beliefs, kind of reframe things to release deeply held emotional pain and patterns. It is something that I think is really powerful. I've gone through some hypnotherapy training, and I think it can be an extremely powerful tool in your tool belt for dealing with trauma. And just to kind of help you understand how hypnotherapy would help you heal from trauma, like I said, accessing the subconscious mind. Because trauma often creates subconscious patterns of fear, shame, anxiety, self-doubt, addiction, all kinds of things. And it allows you to explore and reprogram these patterns, creating new pathways for healing without having to talk about it. Processing repressed memories, which allows this to be processed without re-traumatization, which is really important. Reframing negative beliefs about being unworthy or feeling unsafe. Deals with PTSD, trauma, phobias, all of that, like I said, and helps you kind of connect with your authentic self. It's non-evasive, it's gentle, it's very targeted, It creates lasting change, and it's really quick. So if you are really in a bad space, hypnotherapy is definitely something to consider because it is not a long-term thing. It's quick. If you have a good therapist. Now that's the other thing I have to say is whoever your hypnotherapist is important. So make sure that you really do a lot of research before you choose someone. And the next one, I know this is going to be controversial, but I'm going to say it anyway because it's been profoundly helpful for me, and that is legal. Make sure you hear that. Legal psychedelic therapy. So, before I begin this section, please follow all local laws in regard to substances that you are wanting to use and what's legal in your area. Do not use psychedelics without professional guidance, and do not illegally use them. I cannot tell you what laws are in your local area. I do not know where you are. So I am warning you now. Make sure that you have professional guidance. You're working with professionals, you vet everyone, and that you are using things that are legal in your area. Okay? So I've used several legal psychedelics, and they have been absolutely transformative. I have been blown away by the profound healing and spiritual benefits of this type of therapy. In my opinion, it is more criminal to withhold these substances from people than for those who take them, especially plant medicines. Legal, guided psychedelic therapy is gaining recognition as a profound tool for healing trauma and fostering emotional breakthroughs and even spiritual insights. Native cultures who have used these substances clearly understood their profound sacred healing potential, while modern bureaucrats seek to spread misinformation and fear to prevent anyone from having access to them. Do you think I have an opinion on this? Yep, I sure do, and I'm not going to suppress my opinion for anyone. By utilizing substances such as ketamine, amanita muscaria, psilocybin, kanna, or engaging, some people will go on to international locations for plant medicine like ayahuasca. Individuals can access altered states of consciousness that promote deep healing. These therapies, when facilitated in a safe, controlled, and professional environment, allow participants to process trauma, release emotional blockages, and gain transformative spiritual insights into their inner selves and inner world. So, ketamine-assisted therapy is legal in many countries, not everywhere. I have actually used ketamine journeying under professional supervision and have absolutely loved the results for debilitating anxiety and traumatic ruminating thoughts. I used ketamine, which I realize is not a natural plant medicine. However, I used it because everything else was either out of my current price range or illegal in my area, or I was not able to access it due to having a daughter with severe special needs, so I can't easily travel out of the country. So ketamine can be truly life-changing if you are a candidate. And again, you need to be with a therapist. They need to assess your eligibility and all of that. Ketamine has been approved in many regions for depression, PTSD, anxiety, a lot of things. It induces a dissociative state, helping individuals detach from traumatic memories and view them from a different perspective. It is known for its rapid acting effects. It can provide relief within hours, unlike traditional antidepressants that can take 30 days or take a couple of weeks. And I can attest to the fast acting and life-changing effects because I have gone through 6 ketamine journeys. I did not do the IV infusion therapy, so I don't know what that's like. I did lozenges, and that would give you a 60 to 90 minute psychedelic journey. And I was very religious, for lack of a better word, about my pre-session intentions, spiritual practices prior to the treatment, post-session journaling, integration, avoidance of social media, implementing affirmations and other things to create new neural pathways. So I was huge in really making this an entire practice, not just taking something and thinking it was going to fix everything. So that is an option if it is legal, if you can find, professionals and all of that in your area. But like I said, I'm telling you what I've used and what I've done, but you've got to be really careful with psychedelics. They should not be just frivolously used. Amanita muscaria is another one that I've used. It's legal in a lot of locations, but not everywhere. And Amanita is the mushroom that you see in like Mario Brothers. It has a rich history in shamanic practices used for emotional healing and spiritual exploration. It does promote relaxation, reduces anxiety. It can help access repressed memories in a gentle, kind of dreamlike state. But do not use this mushroom unless it's legal where you are, and make sure you understand its full effects. Because if it is not used with the utmost care, you can have a traumatic trip and it will not provide the healing that you seek. So this is not something to mess around with. Only take this plant medicine under professional guidance. You should never take any of these things when you are alone, without professional observation. Okay. That Amanita, I had a really profound experience with Amanita that was also amazing. I've only used Amanita a few times. I've done some low dose, which gives you a little bit of visuals, kind of floating through tunnels at a high speed, like neon tunnels or something like that are not, and I've also had more profound experiences with it. I've used it a few times. It is legal where I am. So, and then I've also used Kanna, which is legal in most countries. I think like Louisiana, it's not legal in. They're like really nutso about this stuff. Kanna is not a psychedelic. So I don't even know why these bureaucrats are even messing with this stuff, but they do. It's very mild. It does not have psychedelic activity at all. You're not going to see anything. You don't have to avoid driving. It doesn't do any of that. It's not going to give you a trip. It's not going to do anything like that. It's very heart opening. It's very relaxing. It's amazing to ease panic attacks and anxiety. It can be used to enhance meditation practice, which is what I use it for. Or I use it when anxiety was becoming too intense to handle. I would use Kanna, and I would use a higher dose. It is legal in most areas. It does not have negative side effects. It is not going to give you any hallucinations, or alter your state of consciousness in any way, shape, or form. But again, and Kanna you can easily order. It's available online. Just make sure you find reputable places to get it. It is a South African herb known for its mood-enhancing properties. It is used in ceremonial and therapeutic settings to alleviate stress, anxiety, emotional trauma. It is really good. I really like it, but I like it in some concentrated doses. It works by enhancing serotonin levels, but it does so in a natural way. And so it promotes a sense of calm and kind of balances emotions, which I really enjoy it. Ayahuasca is another option, but generally you're going to have to travel internationally depending on where you live because it's not legal most places. Most people travel to Peru, Costa Rica, Colombia so that they can get legal guided ceremonies. There are ayahuasca facilities that offer profound spiritual and emotional healing, bringing buried trauma to the surface for release and insight. These journeys are led by experienced shamans who integrate ancient traditions with modern therapeutic understandings. Do your homework if you choose to participate in plant medicine ceremonies. I don't have experience with ayahuasca because it's too difficult for me to travel internationally. It is on my bucket list, but make sure you do your homework if you're going to do this because there are definitely frightening stories that and very painful experiences people have had, dangerous experiences people have had at non-reputable facilities. So make sure you do your research before you do any of these things. Psilocybin in legal or decriminalized settings, obviously. It is legal in some countries and some U.S. states have decriminalized it. It has shown a lot of promise in treating PTSD, depression, anxiety, a lot of things. It fosters deep self-reflection, emotional breakthroughs, a profound sense of interconnectedness, is profound in emotional and spiritual medicine. Psilocybin is a very powerful medicine, and that is why the bureaucrats want to control it, which I find it ridiculous that you control something that grows naturally in nature, but that's where we are. In my area, there are treatment centers that offer psilocybin journeys that are legal, professionals who will sit with you through the entire journey. but they require a minimum of 2 sessions. They are thousands of dollars. So it is definitely not affordable for everyone to do this in the proper setting. If you choose psilocybin, do not take it on your own. You need to make sure you're guided by a professional. There are professionals who will help you with this, and you can find information on that. But make sure it's legal in your area. Make sure that you're guided by a professional. Do not do this stuff on your own. So that's it for the legal psychedelics. I am a huge fan, but you definitely have to know what you're doing. The benefits of psychedelic therapy: trauma release, emotional breakthroughs, spiritual connection, reductions of symptoms from PTSD, anxiety, panic attacks, and long-lasting transformation. The insights gained during these sessions lead to lasting changes in behavior, well-being, outlook on life. That's what I experienced. And you do need to prepare for the therapy, integration, all of that stuff. So it does need to be assisted by a professional. And then I also, some smaller things is reframing negative self-perceptions. So cognitive reframing is another powerful technique for shifting negative thought patterns and replacing them with positive, empowering beliefs. This process involves recognizing when you're being critical thoughts that you have about yourself, challenge their validity, and consciously choosing a different perspective that aligns with self-love, confidence, and personal growth. There's no benefit to you thinking about yourself in a negative way, or beating yourself up, or being your own worst bully. There's no benefit to that. As you have these negative thoughts, if you can question them, challenge them, and reframe them regularly, you'll begin to transform limiting beliefs and create a mindset rooted in self-worth and hope. So this is another thing that I teach. I'm not going to go into that today because this is already long enough, but if you want to know more about that, let me know. So I want you to, I'm not good enough, I always fail, that kind of thing, and then challenging those and where it came from, and then replacing them with something else. So I'm not going to go too much into that. I was going to, and the last thing that I want to say is giving yourself time and grace to heal from trauma. Healing from trauma is a journey, not a destination, and it requires patience, self-compassion, and grace. Often, survivors feel pressured to move on quickly, or they judge themselves harshly for not healing fast enough. However, true healing unfolds in its own time, and it's individual and unique to each person. So give yourself grace during this process. It is essential for creating a new, fulfilling life. Trauma often instills feelings of shame, self-blame, feelings of inadequacy. Practice self-compassion, which means treating yourself with the kindness and understanding that you would offer a dear friend. Acknowledge your pain without judgment. Recognize that healing is a brave and courageous act that most people never do. I have people in my own life who have suffered profound trauma, and yet they refuse to face it, they refuse to heal it. And I watch them suffer in toxic relationships that reflect the trauma that they refuse to heal. I watch them grow resentful, bitter, angry, constantly using toxic behaviors to buffer, run away from these emotions, and spewing their trauma on everyone around them. This is no way to live. But this is how the majority of the population chooses to handle it. You are courageous for recognizing the need for healing and being willing to do the work. So give yourself credit for that. Give yourself the compassion you need to embark on this journey. Forgiving yourself. Choices that you may have made in survival mode. Times you felt like you, quote, should have done better. Forgive yourself. You did the best you could at the time. And as you heal, you'll do better. When I say forgiveness, I'm not talking about condoning what happened to you or what someone did to you. That's not it at all. Forgiving yourself. But I don't believe in forgiveness for perpetrators. What I believe in for perpetrators is releasing the grip of the past that it has on you. Because you deserve to be happy and you deserve to live a fulfilling life. It isn't condoning them. But the one thing that I will tell you to say about anyone who has hurt you in any way, you no longer have power over me and my life, and I will not let you take one more second of my life from me. It's not about forgiveness. It's about you taking your power back and saying, I will not allow you. You took that moment from me, whatever it was that they did, they took that time from you. but I'm not going to let you take any more of my life from me. That's what it is. Empowering yourself. Forgive yourself. Just let go of them. Set realistic goals. Celebrate small victories in your healing when you were able to express your feelings or set a boundary or you've had progress in some way. And I also want you to create self-care routines. Practicing breathwork, yoga, spending time in nature, reading books, whatever it is that you love to do. And build a supportive environment. Sometimes it means some people are no longer a part of your life, and that's okay. Make sure that the people around you are supportive and encouraging to you. Embrace rest and downtime. Healing can be exhausting, emotionally and physically. Allow yourself to rest without guilt. Downtime is part of the process. Rest is something we all need. Allow yourself to have it. No guilt, no shame, no judgment. Just rest and enjoy it. I do affirmations, but I'm a little hesitant because they have to resonate with you. If it's just not something that even resonates with you, they do not work at all. So you have to be careful with that. But I do like to have them. I don't like to give them necessarily. I do in some of my programs, but I always want you to choose what resonates. Or you can visualize your future self thriving and free of the weight of trauma and focusing on the life you are working toward. And recognizing that this is a lifelong journey and giving yourself time and grace. Another aspect of this is reconnecting with spiritual sovereignty. Reclaiming your innate connection to the divine and embracing your spiritual essence without intermediaries, without external validation. By aligning with the divine feminine, you honor the nurturing, intuitive, and powerful energy that resides within you, reminding you that your worth and guidance come from within. Your connection to the divine. You have it. For me, embracing spirituality helped me break free from limiting beliefs and patriarchal conditioning, allowing me to see myself as a reflection of divine strength and love. This shift transformed my sense of self-worth and power, showing me that my connection to the divine has always been direct and unconditional. You too have this connection. Trust it, nurture it, and let it guide you back to your true self. I want to give you a couple practical daily tools before we end this very long episode. If you're still with me, I express my deepest gratitude for you being here, and I hope that you have found some benefit from today's episode. I really hope that for you, for anyone who is listening. So, some daily practices that have helped me is journaling to uncover and reframe those trauma-based beliefs. When I write it down and I find what resonates with me and how I can reframe these beliefs, super powerful. I do journaling. I have journals all over the place for different things. I have journals for my psychedelic journeys. I have dream journals. I have all kinds of journals. It's been really powerful. Daily breath work or meditation practices to help you stay grounded and move through emotions as you go through your healing journey. Amazing. I do both of those. Avoid negative media influences. That's huge. I do that. I do not watch TV. I do not watch movies. I do not listen to popular music. I don't do any of those things. I used to, and it was a process. It was a little difficult to let go of them, but once I did, profound. I would never go back. I've used healing stones. That's something that was really big in helping me face trauma during some of my psychedelic journeys. I use them during meditation. I really love those. Himalayan salt baths with meditation music and a salt lamp. Very energetically cleansing. So those are just a couple of my suggestions of things that I do, but always do what resonates with you. So thank you for joining me in this deeply personal and transformative episode. Today we explored the profound effects of trauma, self-abandonment, the patterns they create, as well as the healing modalities that can guide us back to wholeness, such as breathwork, hypnotherapy, meditation, even legal psychedelic therapy, journaling. I shared parts of my own journey, from the wounds of childhood, toxic relationships, to reclaiming my power, connecting with my spiritual sovereignty. And now I invite you to reflect on your own journey. Where have you abandoned yourself? And what small step can you take today toward healing? Share your thoughts and breakthroughs with our community on Instagram. Tag me on social media. I would love to hear from you about your stories or how this episode impacted you. My social media handle is @TandyHartle. Or you can also tag @Aura Soul Institute as well. I would love to hear your stories. Your healing is your strength, and your transformation is your gift to the world. Until next time, take care of yourself and embrace your journey with compassion and love.